and I'm sure we'll still have more people come in. But I do want to go get started. When Raelyn and I were talking about this conversation that we had today, we wanted to be relevant. We wanted to talk about current events. And so, as so many of us, speaking for myself, the Pride Center is still not open to the public except for HIV testing. And so now, as we are getting closer to a point of potentially going into our next phase of our reopening plan, comes with that a lot of angst, anxiety, a lot of, well, what should we do? What shouldn't we do? So we've assembled an excellent panel this morning to help answer those questions. And for those individuals who could not attend but still want to watch the video, this will be posted. And Mike, you keep telling me every month where it's posted, and every month my brain is just gone to pandemic mush.
It's on our virtual library on our website, Robert, and it can also be found on the Chamber's YouTube channel.
See, it's very simple, but yet something I can never retain. So let us move forward, and I would like to turn this over to Raelyn, and she will get us started. So take off.
Okay, so you guys, Dolores actually came to us from the chamber and said that they had a lot of talk and inquiry and interest in how the heck people are getting back to the workplace physically, and the concerns, the challenges, the pitfalls, what we need to watch for. And you know, some of it feels a little common sense and some of it feels legal. From an HR perspective, it was interesting talking to Mary. When you hear some of her answers, they're complicated. It's not always a straight, clear-cut answer on what we can do as we move forward to physically being back in the workplace full time. And from Candace's perspective, I have bios for our panelists here. I'm going to read a little quick bit about them. So Mary, let's start with you first before we jump into our questions. Mary is an entrepreneur, a CEO, and a business consultant. She's with the Employee Relations Group, also known as TERG, T-E-R-G. She's been providing HR expertise for over 15 years to dozens of industries and hundreds of successful businesses, spanning from startups to Fortune 500 companies. So she is well-versed in all aspects of business and HR, and she's got some interesting input for us. She's also a very active board member and volunteer, so we applaud you for that. Thank you. And then Mary, did you want to add anything to that before I move on to introduce Candace?
Oh, no, please keep moving along, Raelyn. Thank you, dear.
Okay. All right. And Candace, I am embarrassed to say that I have misplaced your bio. What the heck have I done? Robert Boo, B squared has just failed. Do you have Candace's bio, or we're going to have to ask her to self-introduce from the wonderful Henderson Behavioral Health Center?
Take it away, Candace.
Candace, I'm so sorry. I'm an old-fashioned girl. I even have paper here, and I misplaced it. I'm so sorry.
I have my paper also. Good morning, everyone. My name is Candace Britt Parkerson. I'm a clinical coordinator with Henderson Behavioral Health. Been there for about 7 years now. Been licensed as a clinical social worker for 3 years, and I'm responsible for our youth and family division in the Palm Beach County branch. So, good morning.
And Candace, thank you. This is the first time you've joined us on a panel, so we appreciate that. Henderson always gives us great information and great spokespeople, so welcome. And Francisco is supposed to be here from 211 Broward to talk about some of the resources that we may need moving forward. He is not with us yet, so Mike, I emailed him and copied you. Please watch for him to join us. If he's not here, that means the phone lines are going crazy at 211. That would be my guess, and we do know they have had an amazing need over the pandemic, and it continues. So I'm sure Frank will join us when he can. So Mary, I want to start with you first with the first question. As we go back to work, we certainly have to navigate some uncharted territory here. So let's talk about this group today. Some are employers, the bosses, and some are employees, the folks who will be coming back under the rules set by management and law and our country. But can you be forced to return back to work in person or face losing your job? Let's start there.
So I love how you dive right in and ask that question, because it's one that if you didn't ask, I would love to have it as a follow-up from the audience. And the answer is, as you and I were talking when we did our pre-talk, yes and no. Yes, you can be required to return to work. However, the no comes into play if for some reason you need an accommodation. An accommodation would be you have some form of anxiety or a medical issue that will prevent you from meeting the requirements inside of your workplace as you return. For example, they will probably have protocols set up. You should receive a memo from your HR group or whomever communicates to as an internal contact to all employees. And it should identify the protocols before you return. So none of this should be a surprise. Just so, and I'll just use HR term as we talk here, if you don't mind. So that HR can identify those individuals, because this memo will say, if you need any form of accommodation, please contact Human Resources HR. So this should be an at least 2 to 3 week notification. I mean, we still need to get babysitters, some of you guys, and just make accommodations to return to your regular work schedule. So that's the answer, Raelyn. Thanks for asking that very important question.
And so, as we're coming back, so the answer is, can you be forced to return to work? Yes and no. But then, can you be fired if you refuse to come back to work? Let's say you're frightened, you still have safety concerns, and you just say, no, I can't, for whatever reason that may be. Can someone fire you? Can your employer fire you?
Yes, if you do not have a written reason from a doctor or some type of medical personnel that excuses you, basically. So you can't just say, I'm worried about the protocols. The law will say, if the company has done reasonable measures to put things in place for a safe work environment, once you get there, everyone has to contribute to it working. So there's no guarantee, right? Everyone's going to have to wash their hands, wear the mask, social distance. Your desks or cubicles should already be, or you should have those plexiglasses up. So these are all protocols that should be in place according to your workplace environment. So just to say, no, I'm not comfortable, yes, that will put you in jeopardy of losing your job, and you will be considered to have voluntarily terminated your at-will employment, which means you may be in jeopardy of qualifying for unemployment.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. And Candace, I want to bring you in here because you said from your experience, Henderson has been transitioning back into the workplace. And from a mental health, behavioral health perspective, a lot of folks we saw, I want to find a stat here. I just read a report yesterday, and this is from a study, the 2021 State of Mental Health in America report. It said 8 in 10 people reported moderate to severe anxiety in Mental Health America's online survey. 8 in 10 people. So as you and I were talking about some of the signs and symptoms as people come back to work, you guys are really on the lookout for certain signals. Can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Sure, absolutely. So as we were discussing, I think one of the biggest things that we need to recognize is version from the baseline. So when we're looking at staff that we've had for a considerable amount of time, and we start to see maybe some shifts in the way that their productivity is being done, even their ability to come into the workplace in a timely and efficient manner, little things like that are things that we want to be cognizant of. If there's increased maybe PTO, or maybe if they're not coming into the office like they should, or just taking off without giving any notice, these are signs that there's more going on than just the unwillingness to work. So we had talked a little bit about anxiety and depression and what those things look like. And I'd like to be able to give some symptoms if I could, so that way we could all be more aware. So with regard to anxiety, if you're noticing folks with excessive worry, particularly if it's more significant than the situation at hand, right? So if we are implementing those CDC guidelines, using the PPEs in the office place, making that social distancing mandatory, if those things are happening and we're still seeing those folks who have that excessive significant worry, those are things that we want to be addressing as leadership and employers. In addition to that, we may see difficulty and inability to focus, to follow through on assignments, maybe even talk about sleep issues, inability to sleep or to wake up in the morning. All of these things we notice as those symptoms of anxiety. And then just kind of moving into the depression piece, that's obviously going to mimic some of those symptoms of anxiety. But in addition, you're going to see maybe an increase in negative mood. So maybe they're not as open to brainstorming, or maybe they're, you're noticing that they're not able to even focus on that conversation or bring anything to the table. Those are signs that we want to be looking at. In addition to that, there may be an increase in being tired or fatigued. Loss of interest in the work that they do, and even some somatic symptoms we can find, such as pain in their body, fatigue, increase in headaches, those types of things. If you're hearing those things happening, you definitely want to be following up with them about that.
And Candace, this is something that managers, the leaders of an organization should watch for, but coworkers should watch for it too, right? This is something, keep an eye on your, because we all need to be kind and considerate as we go back. Not everyone's approaching this from the same space. We all come at it from different levels of comfort and possible anxiety. So our coworkers, we really have to look out for each other and watch for signs. We may remember someone from a year ago in the office. How are they now, 14 months later plus?
Right,
Actually,
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
really agree with that. And, we have to then be sensitive if the person is receptive. So I would say, and Candace can, of course, segue in with this, if you approach someone that you see, as Raelyn said, is so different than they were over a year ago, the last time you really, spend time with them in the workplace. If they're not receptive, I would really suggest you report it to HR so that they can approach the individual. Don't just let it go, because the person may be, ashamed. They may not be comfortable expressing it, or they could be in denial. A lot of times, I will be called in for workplace investigation, especially when it's a person's behavior. And I start out by saying, you may not realize that you're behaving this way. So we kind of start, right, Candace, with the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
it opens up a kind of a level playing field of communication, because you're not starting out with, blame, defend
Absolutely.
yourself. This is what we're blaming you for, so go on and defend yourself now.
100%. And I think that you make a great point, Mary. It's about the function behind the behavior, right? So we understand, and just even as an example, with anger, we understand that that is based out of fear. So with that being said, there is a purpose why there is that deviation in the productivity or the overall behavior or mood of a staff member. So we absolutely want to be cognizant of that. And I think that it's absolutely important for those peers, those colleagues, to be having those ongoing conversations. And so one of the things that Raelyn and I were talking about is, how do we proactively have these conversations with our staff, not just from a peer perspective, but also including leadership, so we can be doing those check-ins, right? Maybe even asking some of those questions. Have you guys noticed that you're feeling this way? You definitely want to get on top of it, and HR can provide some great resources to those folks. So that's another great point, Mary. Specifically with Employee Assistance Program, EAP,
Yes.
right? So if you have that available, that's definitely something you want to be touching on. But even promoting self-care in general is going to be huge, and something everyone can do.
Yeah, and I think the protocols that I've helped my clients with, it includes some basic Q&A for management. So we're having management training before we go back into the workplace, because as Raelyn said, these statistics are alarming. And we want to be as sensitive and to give people the feeling before they arrive of a comfort. and not wait until people arrive to realize, that it's a fail. So really take extra measures. I had one client that actually videoed the new work environment as part of the Zoom call, going through the new protocols when everyone returns. So, just kind of thinking out of the box, right, Candace?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm actually written down a couple of things that I thought might be helpful when we're walking into this. And one of the biggest things is flexibility. I understand that returning to the workplace is definitely something that's important to recreating that sense of normalcy. However, I think that looking at job productivity, if those needs are being met and you have someone who maybe is expressing some of those things like Mary was talking about earlier, whether it be medical conditions or the family environment or lack of childcare, if those jobs are being completed in an efficient and effective way, perhaps we could maybe be flexible in the approach. Doing maybe staggered return. Those are things that I think could maybe provide a little sense of just getting a little exposure therapy to the thought of going back and making it a little bit more, blunted rather than just, okay, let's get back and get to work, business as usual.
So
And
yeah,
ladies,
let me, is it okay, Raelyn, if I segue into Candace's recent comments?
yes, please do. I had a question for you, but go ahead. Yes.
Okay, keep that thought. So I wanted to really bring HR back into the flexibility. I think if it's going to be a really productive and received very well, flexibility should really be a consideration, if at all. If it's possible, look at your business model. But you have to work with HR, however, because you can have some people working remote and some not working remote and not bring the organization into a liability issue. So you have to look at groups of employees. So everyone that works in one department, you really have to treat everyone the same and be careful just having, you can't have it just open. So please work with HR so you don't bring in a liability in determining who will work remote and who will not.
Absolutely.
Thank
It's
you,
going to be
Raelyn.
dependent. Oh,
Yes.
sorry, go ahead. Yes, it's absolutely going to be dependent on what that organization looks like. And I think it's just something to consider. But absolutely, we are consulting with HR ongoing, even in our organization being a non-for-profit social work realm. So it's definitely something we want to be cognizant of. Thanks, Mary.
So I want to, because this is our nonprofit group too, I want to think for a minute about our volunteers and the folks that may be coming back to our facilities in addition to staff. So this is something as a nonprofit, when you have that outline support system of people that will slowly be coming back to help you, we have to think about that as well. And they're not technically covered under HR. So I think some of the signs and symptoms that Candace mentioned to watch for in your colleagues, your coworkers, your fellow board members is really critical. So, and one thing that I believe we know is causing a lot of anxiety for some, I don't know the stats, so I'm not going to quote it, but vaccinations. There's still a percentage of the population that has chosen not to be vaccinated, and they will be coming back into the workplace and back to events and back to volunteer. So, Mary, can an employer force you to be vaccinated to come back to work? Is that legal?
So again, my lovely answer of yes and no. The yes is depending upon your business model. If you have a business model that, for example, is restaurant driven, where you're working with the public, it is, it's your responsibility as an employer to protect your employees to the extent that you possibly can. Florida does not have a law currently requiring employers to require employers to have their employees vaccinated. The federal law says, yes, you can. And the vaccination should, again, be looked at depending on your business model. And again, I used a restaurant because the more your organization has touch points with the public, the more this should be a consideration. And again, you look within the organization, and maybe not everyone should have this requirement. And then you would just have them bring their cards, to HR. This should be handled as confidential, HIPAA-related medical information. It's not something you ask in a team meeting, raise your hand if you've been vaccinated, that kind of thing. So it should be handled as I said, sensitive, confidential information. And I would just recommend, an email to HR, because that's under a password protected communication. It's documented. So HR would just send out a note and said, this group of individuals, the company is requiring you to be vaccinated because it is a way for us to protect you to the greatest extent that we know as you work with the public. Now, Raelyn, let's just quickly talk about how would this apply to volunteers. I would say you could not request, even though, let's not forget, volunteers can be under your workers' comp. So, you still have a responsibility toward them. So you can strongly suggest and actually identify what they're doing as volunteers. I've been for years on the board of Meals on Wheels. So my goodness, that group of people, we're doing all we can to get them to the two shots or the one shot, and just click off. We have hundreds of volunteers. Someone in this meeting may be one of our volunteers. And if you are, thank you, thank you, thank you, because our army is everywhere. So again, look at your business model, make sure it's reasonable. If you come to work, you have an office, you can close the door. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't inquire if that person has been vaccinated. So I hope that is a good enough answer. If not, just keep prodding me and I'll do better.
Well, so I want to twist it a little bit. So as our group, as our nonprofit council comes back to being in person, we're doing a slow roll, right, Robert? A hybrid. So is it proper? I think it's a little uncomfortable to ask people, have you been vaccinated? What have you done? I think as we come together as a group, we need to be a little bit cognizant of that. People are a little anxious. They may want to know if you've been vaccinated or not, but we shouldn't really ask, right? Management.
No, I think as organizations, non-employers, no, it's literally none of your business. However, you should and continue, because we all know this virus is not gone. And because there are still people carrying the virus is still alive and well. And, vaccination is the strongest preventive measure we know of right now, but it is still a choice. However, as an organization, I would strongly recommend you not discuss it, require it. However, you should continue to require physical distances in meetings, the 6 feet apart, and mask if it is a closed environment where you're not sure of the ventilation. I recently had a meeting on Saturday with the board. They were a client, and we did do, so a board can be different. You can ask, is everyone in the room vaccinated? We asked 2 questions. I started out by asking, is everyone comfortable with or without mask? So that we know who wants to mask up. And no one wanted to mask. And then I asked, has everyone been vaccinated? They said yes. I said, is everyone comfortable having this meeting now without mask? So I think as a board meeting, you can do that. But when you have an organization or volunteer meeting, I would not suggest that be communication.
That makes a lot of sense. And Candace, I want to bring in something that you said, and I'm going to use your quote. You said at Henderson, the motto as you migrate back to the office full time and in person is you guys are choosing flexible with the approach, stern with the goal. And I thought that was such a great way to describe how you're handling the transition. So talk to us a little bit about that. You said you really have to understand if employees are apprehensive, where it's coming from. And there's and that they understand the CDC guidelines, et cetera?
Yeah, so we, again, we are steadfast in our approach of ensuring the CDC guidelines are met at our organizations. And with regard to the flexibility piece, I think it kind of touches on what Mary was speaking about earlier, and it is those medical conditions. I know we were talking about one of our staff in particular who has a young boy who is recovering from cancer, and he had obtained COVID. And so it's situations like that where that flexibility comes into place. And again, you know, as Mary said, within the guidelines of respecting HR and the organizational approach. But the flexibility piece, and particularly for us, we are an in-community organization, so we provide services in the home, okay? So it's a little bit different of an approach. It's not just an office setting. So we utilize teletherapy in our approach and are going to be adopting that moving forward. It's been actually very fruitful, but flexibility in those ways. So perhaps doing some of that work from home, doing some of that work in the community, in addition to making sure we're proactively preventing the possibility of obtaining COVID while out in the field or in the office. And so, as Mary stated, making sure we're using that social distancing piece. In addition to that staggered approach of coming back into the office, making sure that we're providing masks, right? And then also, you know, we're doing our part to ensure that they have access to the vaccination. We want to make sure, and I think it's super important to respect the fact that some people don't want to talk about that, whether they've been vaccinated or not. So we absolutely have to honor that. But just making sure that the resources are available. And then also being cognizant of the childcare piece. That was something else that was brought up by Mary that I think is an excellent point. This is something that folks are having some real strong difficulty with. So just kind of being thoughtful and mindful of those things to ensure that we keep the valuable staff that we have.
So Candace, thank you for circling back on childcare. I'm not sure that you all are aware, but only 50% of our daycare, childcare centers have reopened.
Right.
50%. So a lot of people, as we start opening up offices again, will have that as an issue. I can't come back because I can't find childcare.
Right.
And, you know, we'll have to work with those individuals because it is a fact. It's not something they're making up. So that will be something I would encourage organizations to actually start, again, thinking outside of the box. And maybe that becomes an accommodation. And, you know, I see nothing wrong with that being an accommodation. You know, as long as they, you know, you get things in writing. It's not that you're treating one person with a child differently than another person without a child. So those are the liabilities that, you know, people like me think of 20 steps down the line. And basically, how would I want to be treated? I don't have a child. So, you know, is this something that I'm going to feel like I'm lesser of if I'm not able to work from home, but this person is? And what you do is you talk, communicate it, say, hey, there is a general struggle in our economy, in our business right now, that 50% of our daycare centers are not open. And we wouldn't usually talk about who has a child and who doesn't have a child, but this is real and we need to support each other. So just communicate it to all of the employees. Tell them what's going on so they don't feel like, or they hear about it. You really don't want an employee to hear about this from someone else. Oh, they're working from home because they have a child. You should have had a general staff meeting, all staff meeting, and communicate this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that we were talking about, Raelyn, on the phone was, you know, I think it's absolutely imperative that you create an environment and a space for folks to be able to have these conversations ongoing. And so, you know, with our particular organization, we have bi-weekly COVID update meetings where we're having these conversations. What are the updates? What are the continued barriers? And in that way, when Mary's talking about this out of the box thinking, you may have multiple staff members that are experiencing childcare issues, and perhaps one of them may have an opportunity or a resource to connect other folks too. And so in having this ongoing communication, you're actually creating more natural resources that are available for those folks.
I want to get to, Mary, let me get to one of the questions in the chat for just a minute, if you don't
please.
mind.
Oh yeah, I saw some popping up here.
Because this came from Maria, and it was as we were talking earlier about something, asking certain questions in front of other employees, what should be done privately. And Mirtha also asked if you should address it if one of your board members is not vaccinated. It kind of goes together. What do you ask in a group, and what do you ask privately, for a whole lot of reasons, starting with just sparing your fellow colleagues, coworkers, and peers uncomfortable situations. What should we do?
So any ask of if you've been vaccinated, if you have been exposed to COVID, all of those are still medical questions that should not be asked by an individual to another employee. If they are asked, there should be a reason they're being asked. You are showing symptoms of COVID. You're absent, and the absence is because of COVID-related symptoms. So again, this is no different than any other illness. It's none of your business, and you should not be asking someone a medical-related question. You're not qualified, and there's no reason in your job description to be discussing someone's health.
And Mary, if I may interject here, I think the intent of the original question was in regards to the board, and having that conversation with the board of, because you said if it's the board, we can go ahead and ask, but if it's staff, it's something that is HIPAA regulated. Is that correct?
I think so. This has been going out. I'm on 4 boards, and we've sent out, surveys. Are you ready to meet in person? If, kind of a checklist I actually created for us. Are you ready to meet in person? Yes or no? We will have social distances. We will have masks unless everyone says they are vaccinated, and you put on there, have you been vaccinated? And you report back. You don't say, well, Mary said she wasn't. You just report back and say one member on the board hasn't been vaccinated. We're not going to inquire if they will or won't. So we will have masks and social distancing when we meet in person. It's simple as that. And I think that kind of thing with the board will go over well. Just a quick memo, email and checklist like that, Robert. And let's talk again, let's not forget what Candace was highlighting on the ongoing conversation. I love how employers like Robert Boo over at the Pride Equity Center, they're actually having on-site vaccinations. I know the Riverwalk Trust is having vaccinations at one of their events. So again, thinking outside of the box, making it available, as Candace was saying, there are a lot of organizations partnering with those organizations that provide the vaccination and just having events. So you can have an event at your workplace when you as an opening, say, part of our opening the office, the Tuesday after we open, we're going to have someone on site from, 10 to 2 doing vaccinations, something like that. Call CVS, call your EAP, work with HR. There's so many organizations willing to assist in that way.
So then, Mary, what I'm understanding, and I kind of merged those 2 questions in the chat, and if we have any others, we've still got some time for a few questions. So I did kind of merge those 2. So it sounds like there's a kind of, well, you said the answer was yes and no a lot. So there's kind of a clear-cut procedure you can follow with employees, and HIPAA safety, HIPAA privacy is at the heart of that. And then with your board, which is a volunteer organization, you could be a little bit looser without the threat of HIPAA violations, but be considerate.
Yes.
Handle it as with consideration and compassion and
Perfect.
privacy.
Perfectly stated. Yes.
Okay. And Candace, you said something to me that just made so much common sense. You said, we have to all get through this together. We have to get through this as a collective, whatever that collective may be, a large employee workspace, a small workspace, your networking groups, your volunteer groups. So is there anything else from working together collectively that you want to share that Henderson's doing, or that folks could take into their going back to the workplace full time, their networking groups? Any other tips?
Yeah, so I think it's really just holding at the heart of every conversation your shared vision, which is the success of what it is that you guys are doing, right? So what is the goal of your business? What is everyone's role and responsibility in that? And honoring and respecting that piece, as well as, how they're feeling about coming back to the workplace. And again, that open communication is going to be key as it pertains to making sure that everyone continues on that path towards that shared vision and goal. I think that in addition to those check-ins that we're doing, we had talked about EAP, making sure that that's readily available, having conversations all together about how are we making it every day, right? So a lot of us are hurting, a lot of us are struggling, but we're still doing it. So really highlighting those positives and, building on those. So talking about that self-care piece, what are we doing, and what more can we do? But in addition to that, just, making sure that we continue to respect those guidelines, respect people's feelings about that, and then asking those questions ongoing so we can, gauge and really see where everyone's at. But I feel as long as we do that, that's really going to be the key to the success of eventually moving towards this face-to-face and in-person all in total.
And
so Raelyn,
Francisco from 211 Broward was unable to join us this morning. We don't know what happened there, but I can tell you, I believe the spike they've seen in the calls to 211 Broward looking for support, looking for services, he said the spike has just been dramatic. I want to say, Robert, it was something like 400% over the last year, an increase in calls to 211 looking for services, for mental health calls, for stress from COVID, financial pressures, anxiety. So as you go through this, remember you can refer people to 211 Broward to look for resources in all those areas. Henderson is a great resource. So there is help out there, and we'll send some notes from Francisco after this. But Mary, one other question that we didn't get to, and I want to make sure we touch on this. Obligations as an employer. What physical safety measures is an employer obligated to put in place? The shields, what do we physically have to do for our people?
So great question. I do want to circle back to one comment on healthcare, but let's please, Raelyn, talk about this question. So an employer is actually required by law to have to present accommodations to employees, and these accommodations at this time should be PPE. So you should you are required as an employer to provide mask, hand sanitizer, to have postings up. How many people are allowed to be in the elevator? How many people are allowed to be on the stairwell? All of these postings should have been up a long time ago, but if they're not, they really should be up before you return to work and open the office. How many people should be in the restroom? There should be a posting on the outside of the restroom. These are requirements the employer should be considering and accommodating before you return. Looking at your business model, if you have a receptionist desk, that's part of the makeup of your organization, then yes, you should invest in the plexiglass. These are investments that are the cost of doing business. And I know of a couple of vendors my clients have worked with. They're not gouging in pricing. and they're expediting and getting them out fairly quickly. So, look at the cost, but it is the cost of doing business. If you have cubicles and all of your workstations are open, yes, you should look at if you can afford the cost of also, the plexiglass or some type of physical separation of your workstations as well. I know several of my because people went away from everyone having a door in an office and a door in an office. And so we went to this open workplace in many organizations. So yeah, we're looking at all of that differently now. I hope that answers, Raelyn. Please cue me in if it did not.
Oh, it did. And if anybody wants to ask anything else about that, I think you covered the big picture very well. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Candace. We had someone ask in chat the difference between Henderson and 211 Broward. So I'll just quickly say 211 Broward is it's a phone lines. It's a call-in center. I'm not going to do it justice like Francisco would if he were here, but you can call in to find out about all the services that are available in Broward County in all different areas. They are a resource. Dial 211 on your phone and you can get to the senior touch line. You can get to a huge list of resources in our community, and sometimes it's the first place to start if you need help. So one of the things Francisco had wanted to share is that our nonprofit community seems to be very familiar with 211 Broward, but our for-profit community and those outside the nonprofit are not as familiar. And he had a stat on that. So it's just something to be aware that they offer the services, they offer the links to resources throughout our community. And you can look them up at 211broward.org. And Candace, Henderson is different in how you provide services. So just a quick touch on that.
Sure, absolutely. So Henderson Behavioral Health is a non-for-profit organization, and we're primarily based on mental and behavioral health services. However, we offer the full gamut from preventative services all the way to crisis services, individual therapy, case management for youth and adults, recovery services, you name it, we have it, particularly down in Broward. And I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what you were saying with regard to 211. And I just wanted to point out it's not just mental health services or behavioral health services. This is financial services. This is, if you have needs for your child, if you need employment assistance, anything like that, they're able to assist with. And in addition to that, they also have crisis services. So if you're experiencing a crisis, you absolutely can contact them and they can connect you with someone who can meet with you, speak with you, or your staff, and really be able to just kind of assess what's going on and maybe even build a roadmap to recovery from there. So they're a great resource. We work very closely with them. However, we're more of that provider that they'd be referring you to at the end of the day.
Right.
So Raelyn, is this a time I can circle back to my health comments I wanted to add? Okay, so I just wanted to make sure I talk to and remind everyone on this call. There are some organizations that, we've talked a lot about healthcare and EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. Well, we have some organizations and businesses that don't even offer healthcare. So you don't have an EAP program to turn to, right? So let's not forget about that group. Or maybe your organization or company offers healthcare, but you can't afford the premiums. So you're not even enrolled in the healthcare that the organization provides. And I did not want to leave out speaking to those, because even if your organization offers healthcare, you may have some people that cannot afford to be enrolled. Please use 211 as a vehicle to help them for guidance. And that was the third leg on our stool here, and that's why it was such an important piece of what Candace and I were bringing.
Absolutely.
Because 211 should be a resource. I use it all of the time, in covering all of the different business models that I work with. Because, you know, like I said, a lot of organizations offer it, don't offer it. And then there's a lot of them have, you know, minimum wage level, entry level headcount that don't enroll because of the cost of the premium.
And I want to piggyback on that really quickly because that's a great point. With regard to those folks who don't have insurance, maybe if it's just medical and not really that good of behavioral, I really think it's important to note that there are funds available through the state, even through the Department of Children and Families, that's afforded to those folks who do not have insurance. So just making sure that you're even reaching out to the health district for your area, or even reaching out to a non-for-profit who is monitored by one of the 6 managing entities here in the state of Florida. They have specific funding to assist those folks who don't have insurance for those mental health or psychiatric needs. And Henderson can absolutely assist with kind of getting you connected with what that looks like, or some resources in that way, in addition to 211. I just wanted to throw that out there. It's a great point.
That's wonderful, wonderful help. And this is a little off the topic, but 211 Broward Senior Touch Line. If you guys are not familiar with it, I will start to cry. It literally saved a friend's life, and I am so thankful to them. It is a story for another day, but they offer so many services. And just if you can. Those of us in the nonprofit community are aware, but those who aren't, share the word about the resources, from housing to financial assistance to anxiety, depression, COVID resources. They are a plethora of support services, and you just call in and they'll guide you in the right direction. So Mary and Candace, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but Robert, did you have a question?
Well, actually, I don't have a question. I have a plug and a personal recommendation. So I've mentioned this many months ago, but I'm going to say it again. We as a center, and from what Mary and Candace, and if Frank were here, they would all agree, I think, in one of the messages that's coming out of today: have a plan. So last October, we completed a 65-page reopening plan and operating plan for COVID. And when I say we, I'm being very generous. Christopher Feckenbush is my COO, and he's on here, and he spearheaded the project. But we worked with Joel at Executive Service Corps, where they provided 3 C-suite retired folks. And we worked with Mary on this reopening plan. So we looked at it from the physical safety within the organization, the buildings itself, and then we also looked at it from the HR perspective that Mary has been speaking about. And so this is not a Bible that's written in stone. It is not the cure-all, answer-all. If anyone wants a copy of it, we have shared it very generously to anyone and everyone, and shared it with centers across the country, because this is something that you can take, you can modify, you can use the bits and pieces. Why recreate the wheel if the wheels are there? Steal shamelessly and use it for your own best advantage. So if that can be a resource for you, feel free to reach out to me, and I will share that document with you. It is what we have been using as our guide of determining which characteristics the community needs to reach for us to open up safely to protect our staff as well as protect the community. We have over 60 groups, organizations that utilize our meeting room space on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, but we don't facilitate those groups. So once they go behind closed doors, it's not as if we have a staff person that is there to ensure all of the CDC guidelines are operating. And so until some characteristics such as the positivity rate and other factors in the South Florida are met, that is what we're using as our guide to say, when we meet all of these criteria, then we can safely and slowly open back up. And we're getting close to that point, but it all does come back to a plan. So it's not as if I'm just sitting here going, well, I just don't feel like I'm doing it, want to do it yet. But you have a document, you have the source document, you have something that you can point to people to show what your plan is. So I think out of all of this wonderful news and information that Candace and Mary and Raelyn have been sharing, it really does come down to, what is your plan? Is it written down? Is it something that you can follow and then provide to the staff, which all of our staff received this back in October, our board, we've made it public. So I think if that helps, please reach out. More than happy to share.
And so I want to wrap this up. I think we've only got a couple minutes left, and Mary and Candace might have a final thought. So it feels like three things to me, folks. It feels like keep in mind HIPAA privacy as you navigate back to being in person, whether that's at work or events, however that may be. And then compassion and communication. You know, have compassion for your fellow colleagues, wherever that may be, the workplace, a networking event, a volunteer event. Not everyone comes back to the workplace with the same mindset. We don't know what people's individual circumstances are behind the scenes. So just communicate where it's appropriate and safe and following HIPAA standards, and show compassion for each other. You know, anxiety and depression is at an all-time high, and that's not going to fade away quickly as we navigate back. So be patient with people. And Mary, if you or Candace have a final thought, and then we'll wrap things up.
My thought, we were waiting for each other and then we both started at the same time. I'll go first, Candace. I don't have a final thought because Boo took my final thought. Thanks a lot. And that was have a plan. So I will make a plug as well, and that is to thank Raelyn. You've done an excellent job with us this morning as our moderator. Thank you so much.
Well, I learned from you guys. It was enlightening conversation, so thank you. And I'm sorry Francisco couldn't be here. I know there's something happening if he's not. So, and Candace?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, yes, I want to agree with Mary's sentiments. Thank you, Raelyn. I think this was an awesome opportunity for us to kind of get together and have some of these conversations. But again, you know, in addition to that plan, which I think is vital, absolutely vital, you know, it brings that structure into the mix. Just again, that communication piece it's insurmountable. We absolutely have to be communicating and respecting and honoring those staff and making sure that we are connected and continuing to have these conversations in addition to having that structure. So I just think that's probably the biggest thing that I could give is just overall communication with staff and leadership.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Candace. Thank you, Mary, for your skills, your expertise, and sharing all of that information for us today. So again, Jenny is on the call. If you are not a chamber member, I'm going to give that plug. Please contact Jenny, discuss what the wonderful benefits are of being a member. The Pride Center, we've been a member of the chamber since 2006. I've been on the board of directors a number of years and involved in committees, and you get out what you put in, but it's not going to fall on your lap. So you need to work at this, do the networking, build the relationships. There's many people in this room and space that I would not have had the opportunity or the honor of interacting with and meeting and building as friends. And I work closely with Mary. I adore her. I think she's the smartest person on the face of the earth. And but I'm also in fear of doing anything wrong because I know that she'll come up and hit me upside the head and go, "What the heck were you thinking?"
Robert, we do not promote violence in the workplace. That was not part of this panel.
It's a
we do not
secret that I
violence.
hit, Boo.
Yeah. It's the secret hat. But so we are at 10:30. So thank you, Raelyn, for facilitating this expertly as you always do. So in June, once again, we are going to try our hybrid. I'm going to get over my anxiety of maybe being in a room. That's my personal, I'm owning that and being upfront and honest about it. But Mike is going to work with us to see if we can pull that off in June. If you are comfortable, we'll be sure to send out what the guidelines are that the chamber has put into place, the number of people that can go in the room, all the CDC requirements. And then we will also offer the online aspect just as we are doing now. So Raelyn, do you have anything else?
I do not. I just want to say thank you, Mary. Thank you, Candace. Don't forget about 211 Broward. Share their resources, and you guys as experts, we appreciate your time and your information. Thank you so very much. And everybody have a great day.
And big shout out to Mike Cabello for all the help he does with us.
Magic
IT
Mike.
wise.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Have a good one.
Bye, guys. Thank you.